Hey everybody, I'm back, and today we're going to talk about Enid II, Churchmouse. Now, Churchmouse is kind of the first song on the album to really express kind of like a sad, like a longing, like a heartache. And that's really what the song is about. It's about heartache. It's about rejection and loneliness, and kind of approaching those feelings in real life. And how it can, if you have kind of like a wavering faith, how it can cause you to doubt. You can. I've seen and talked to so many people and been through this myself, where I just felt like, and these people felt like the pain that they experienced, the pain of loss, was so great that that itself was enough to make them question the existence of a God that loved them. And that's really what this song is kind of meant to express. And it makes the album's first reference to Samson and Delilah, which is a biblical story in Judges, where Samson was one of the judges of the nation of Israel, and he was a Nazirite, so he had these rules that he was supposed to follow from birth. He couldn't cut his hair, he couldn't drink wine, or anything like that, and as a result, he was incredibly strong, and he was known for his prowess in combat, for how many Canaanites he killed. He was supposedly he killed like an army of Canaanites by himself with nothing but the jawbone of a donkey. But in the end, what brought about Samson's downfall was his lust for women, and he ended up becoming involved with a woman named Delilah, who was a Canaanite woman, and she was contracted by the Canaanite government to find the secret to Samson's strength. And so she kept pushing him about, like, what's the secret, like, what makes you so strong? And he kept telling her like different false reasons for his strength, and she kept trying to like go after those things and thwart those things, but in the end she would find that he was lying about that wasn't really where his strength came from. But eventually, in the end, she had worn him down so much that he eventually told her the truth, that if his long hair was cut, that his strength would be gone from him forever. So when he was sleeping, she cut all of his hair off, and in fact, he lost all of his strength, and he was taken prisoner by the Canaanites. And what I think is funny about that story is that she wasn't even really being deceitful. She repeatedly went after these things that he had told her were the source of his strength, and so that's clearly what she was after, was the source of his strength. And him, knowing that, with that being obvious, eventually did cave and tell her the truth, knowing what she was going to do. And I think that just that kind of is a statement to the power that women kind of have over men. And this is kind of a weird day and age to be saying that, but it's been in poetry since the dawn of time that a woman is a man's biggest downfall. And that was really something that was on my mind and on my heart when I wrote this song, because I was going through that heartache. I was going through that rejection, through that loneliness, when I was in love with a girl and she didn't love me back, and that pain that I felt was the source of my faith and my solidity kind of being slowly pulled out from underneath me over just years and years at a time. And also, the Churchmouse is the first song on the album to make a reference to dirty clothes, which is made several times throughout the album. But the dirty clothes reference is to like a mortal body. Like, your body is the dirty clothes of your soul, and when you die, when you go to heaven to be with God, then you're just shedding your dirty clothes. There's no fear of death, because all it is you being rid of your flawed body and being given a new one, a perfect body. And if you read the footnotes that I put in the lyrics, every time that comes up, there's a reference to Revelation 7:9, which is that same idea, where John, or whoever wrote it, is having this vision of heaven, and he sees this great host of people, and they're all wearing pure white robes, because they are shed of their dirty clothes, they're shed of their flawed bodies, of their mortality, and they're one with God. And that is kind of a reference to death, because a lot of this album is about death, also about experiencing that ultimate kind of pain of loss. And the whole song is just kind of like highlights this frailty of heart, that your heart and your mind and your body are weak, and they can't stand up to the pain, to the imperfections of the world, and that kind of perfection that is longing to be attained is really the album's whole concept. That it's about feeling like there should be some attainable perfection, that there should be a way to make things right, to make things not hurt anymore, to not feel desperate anymore. But in the end, you kind of find that doesn't really exist. And there's a line in this song that says, "Good God, pure and clean, digging up our filthy things, but being quiet, never seen," which I think is one of the most important lines to me on the entire album, because if I didn't have as many words to say what I'm trying to say, if I didn't have 13 songs, if I didn't have X amount of space, if I only had one sentence to say how I feel, it would be that one. That line is kind of the summary of the entire album, and it's kind of a reference to Friedrich Nietzsche in The Gay Science, when he says God is dead. And Nietzsche, when he said the quote, Nietzsche never really actually believed in a literal God, and he wasn't saying that we like literally killed God, but what he was saying was there's a correlation, there's a connection between religion and believing in God and having that kind of that morality that is attached. And when one doesn't really have that faith anymore, and when one doesn't really see God, when God doesn't really seem to exist anymore, then that morality, that moral compass that you had before, logically couldn't really exist. And that all depends on how attached those two things are to you. But in the end, that's what that's about. And there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of not really knowing who you are when you start to experience that. When you start to kind of walk away from your faith. And that, I just say walking away. That's not really what this is about. That line really isn't meant to say like I'm denouncing God, that I'm denouncing Christianity. The pain and the agony behind it is really expressing a feeling that God is perfect, and that God is pure and clean, and that he exposes the things that are bad in us, but at the same time it feels like God has walked away from me, has left me, and it's not really the other way around. But it's that God has kind of abandoned me and us, and when it seems like there is no longer God, no matter how much you want to believe he's there, there's this hardship in still wanting to be the same person that the Christian church taught you to be. And I invited Alex Owens of Beneath the Waves to sing that line with me. And it was very special to me, partially because it stemmed from kind of a late night phone call that me and him once had, where we were kind of talking about this same thing, and he had kind of felt burned by the Christian church in pretty much the exact same way that I had, and we stayed up late talking about that, and I felt like out of all the people I could have asked to come sing that line with me, to do those guest vocals, then he would have been the one understand it the most, and that's why it was so important to me to. I knew I wanted him to come sing a line with me on this album because he's a really good friend of mine. He's a really good friend of the band's. He's been a huge helping hand to us. He's gotten us into a lot of things that we wouldn't have been able to do ourselves because we're bad at managing our own bands. But we knew we wanted to have him come on and sing a line, and I knew immediately that it had to be that one. And there's one other thing. The last chorus, the last line of the last chorus says that I left my heart up in the north, and that is a reference to several years ago. I was on vacation with my family in Wyoming. We were visiting family that we had up there, and we were staying with them because my dad is actually from Wyoming, and so I have a lot of extended family up there. And I remember I was probably 18 or 19 when this happened, but I was up there and I was sleeping in like a living room of some kind, and I remember having one of the worst anxiety attacks that I've ever had in my entire life. It was kind of when all my depression and my anxiety was kind of started to reach kind of a boiling point, which kind of persisted for a few years even after that, and even into now to some degree. But that first major anxiety attack, almost panic attack that I had while I was up there, I really feel like part of me kind of stayed up there, in that when I came back, I wasn't really the same as I was before, and anxiety kind of has a way of doing that to you, where every anxiety attack that you have over a subsequent period of time, you start to feel like yourself a little bit less, and a little bit less, and a little bit less. And so Churchmouse is all about kind of those thoughts and those feelings all kind of swimming around in your head as you're going through this heartache, through this hardship, through this sadness, through this self-loathing, and through this feeling that God has abandoned you. That's pretty heavy, but that's also why Churchmouse is one of my favorite songs on the album, because it's so deeply personal to me, and I feel like will probably be very deeply personal to a lot of other people too when they really dig into what it's about, the meaning of kind of losing yourself to this depression, this anxiety, this sadness. But anyway, that's Churchmouse. Tomorrow we're going to tackle Hosea, so that should be fun. But thank you guys for watching yet again. Love you guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks. Bye. I've got this pain.